All right, we are going to go live shortly. Okay, we are live back, Rise webinars. I'm very, very, very excited to share this webinar. This webinar is all about Google Ads versus Microsoft Ads. Now, most of all advertisers out there, everyone understands you got to be on Google. That's where everyone is. This webinar is an awesome education session because there's a time and a place to advertise on Microsoft, and we see a lot of interesting performance metrics from Microsoft. And frankly, a lot of our clients are migrating to Microsoft in addition to Google, not replacing. And that's why we have this webinar really just going into Microsoft. What's the value behind it? What can you expect? And how does that compare against Google? Super pumped to have Jess Shuttleworth join us. Jess, if you don't mind taking a quick moment to introduce yourself, that'd be super helpful.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jess. I am the VP of Client Services here at Rise. I've been here for about 5 years. Prior to that, worked in nonprofit marketing, doing a little bit of everything. So good 10, 15 years of experience in the industry.
Awesome. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Ben Lund. I'm the founder of Rise Marketing Group. Founded Rise almost 6 years ago, which is crazy to think about. Been in the industry since 2005. Worked at companies like Yahoo, Google. Even got this mug from Google on my first day at the job in Cambridge, and then founded Rise. So that's a little bit about us, but super excited to get into the content here. So let's just jump into it. And just real quickly, as anyone has questions, feel free to jump in the chat. We are moderating this. Happy to talk about any of those questions that you have. Also, for anyone who's listening right now, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We are doing a lot of webinars. Previously, we were just doing webinars monthly, but now we're going to do bi-weekly, so every other week, and very much value-driven content. So let's jump into it all. So what are we going to cover? We're really going to do a 360 view of Google versus Microsoft. And each of these points, every advertiser that's considering to advertise on Microsoft should really get a lot of value out of it. So we're going to talk about reach. We're going to get into competition. And there's a huge difference in competition between Google Ads and Microsoft Ads, which you're probably going to find really interesting. We're going to cover demographics, device overview, LinkedIn integration, which is a huge selling point on Microsoft Ads. So definitely hang around for LinkedIn integration. We're going to talk about the amount of data each platform has, Google Ads versus Microsoft. AI, and there's an AI battle going on between the two, ChatGPT, Google Bard, and how does that help advertisers advertising on each of these platforms. And then lastly, we're going to provide some advice on how to get started with Microsoft Ads. And just to tease this up, it's very simple. Microsoft has a lot of really helpful tools to import campaigns from Google. So we're going to really cover the whole gamut of this. Again, 360 view. And as anyone who's listening, if you have questions, definitely jump in and ask. We're going to be moderating. So with that, let's get into the first one. So let's get into reach. Now, Jess, I mean, we all know Google has a lot of reach, right? Let's talk about Microsoft. I mean, is there an audience on Microsoft that you can't reach on Google? Love to get your thoughts here.
Yeah, so that's I think the really interesting piece about Microsoft is that while it only holds, let's say, 3% or so of the share of the search market, that still equates to about 100 million daily users. So there's a lot of people who are still on Microsoft, and while it's a smaller pool, it's people that you likely are not reaching on Google. The Bing network also captures AOL, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo. So you've got a lot of different places that people are searching. So it's largely an untapped market, which is really interesting if you're just looking for an extra boost and a way to reach different people.
Yeah, and that's such a interesting point, and a good point to make is when people think advertising on Bing, they're like, okay, I get it. We're going to advertise on Bing. But Bing was really smart, and Microsoft was smart. They know that they're competing for search dollars against Google. So instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to have a Microsoft only search engine and monetization platform, they pulled resources and brought in AOL and Yahoo and DuckDuckGo, which I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this webinar right now have heard of DuckDuckGo. That's actually an up-and-coming search engine that's very much privacy-focused, which a lot of people are into these days. So you definitely get a really nice reach of all these engines, which at one point, a lot of these engines had their own ad platform. And speaking from experience, I used to work at Yahoo back in 2005 or 2007, one of those years. It's been a while. But at that point, they had their own ad platform to advertise on Yahoo, but now through Microsoft and their network of engines, they can pull it all together so any business out there can just spread their message across every engine out there. So yeah, that's super interesting. And Jess, for any advertisers that's considering of advertising on Microsoft, understanding that there is a different audience and reach, is there a percentage of budget that maybe they should be thinking about when testing Microsoft as compared to Google?
Yeah, typically when we are working with clients and we're moving them from Google to Bing, we tell them to look at somewhere between 20 to 30% of their Google budget. So definitely a reduction, not any kind of dollar amount that you're spending on Google, but just to test it out and see what happens. Some people find that Bing actually has better performance than Google and end up investing more. But yeah, starting with a much smaller amount, just because that search market share is so much smaller, is the right way to go.
Yep. So 20 to 30%, really good benchmark. And just to put it into business terms for anyone who's listening, if for 2024 you're looking for an extra 20 to 30% of customers, well, this really could be your ticket there if you're not currently present on the Microsoft network of engines. So awesome. Thank you so much, Jess. Super helpful for covering reach. Now let's get into competition. So we know Google's competitive. It's always been competitive, and for the right reasons. That's where majority of people start off their search. Not everyone, which we just covered. But Jess, why don't you share with everyone what can we expect in terms of competition and maybe even CPCs?
Yeah, sure. So what we found on Bing is that what it lacks in volume, it really makes up for in performance. So typically on Bing, we see much lower CPCs. That can be as low, like nearly 70% lower than what we're seeing on Google. And that varies by industry, of course, but some really low CPCs. So you're getting kind of cheap traffic, higher engagement, higher conversion rates, and that potentially means better ROI if you have the right traffic. So we're always interested in what the performance is and optimizing towards those performance metrics that we're looking at. But Bing is really unique in that sense that less people are on there, there's less competition, and so there's really a lot of opportunity when you're talking about these smaller dollars and looking for a little boost.
Yeah, that's right. And so many Google ad advertisers, they'll reminisce of the heyday of like, oh, I remember when I was advertising on Google 10 years ago and CPCs were just $1 or 70 cents. Well, you can still attain those type of CPCs on Bing. So get in before that gets overly competitive. So yes, smaller CPCs. And again, it just comes down to a lot of advertisers out there. They just don't think of Bing. They're like, I'm on Google. Why put in the effort into it? Definitely put the effort into it because you will get some level of return. And just even at face value to start, it's going to be very efficient CPCs. And you can probably rank a lot higher on the ad side than Google, which is getting more competitive really every quarter. So thanks for covering that. So that's about competition. Now let's get into demographics. Now this is really interesting and something that advertisers should be considering because there is a little bit different of demographics between Google and Bing. So just let's talk about that. What is the difference between Google and Bing from an audience profile perspective?
Yeah, and you can find this research out there. There's about a large percentage of the users, about two-thirds are male who are using Bing. Typically, the age bracket is somewhere between 25 to 44. And they also skew with a higher income bracket. So a lot of people under the 100K per year mark. So that means you're talking about potentially a more quote unquote professional audience, people who are in business areas, perhaps slightly older, maybe more an educated audience. And this is really interesting for a lot of our B2B clients too, who are looking to kind of tap into that professional network of users. And this probably gets into a little bit about what we're going to talk about in the next slide. That also really comes down to device too, which plays a role there.
Yeah, yeah, super interesting. Every advertiser has a specific audience, and for whatever reason, Bing does have higher household income as an audience, and we're going to get to this in a little bit more B2B and also device specific. If you're looking for some of these attributes, it can do quite well to advertise on this. I mean, I remember I was at a search conference, this is probably about 10 years ago, and Microsoft was up on the stage, or Yahoo, and they were just talking about how, for whatever reason, their audience has a higher household income. They really couldn't even explain it, but that was just the profile. But for e-commerce advertisers, that's super helpful, and also for B2B, just to kind of go after that higher household income. But yeah, Justin, so you alluded to it. Let's talk about the device overview, because this is super interesting that this is a huge difference between Google and Bing and how people access these search engines.
Yeah, so we've seen this across clients who have gone from Google to Bing. Bing, because it's not installed on most smartphones, it's great for desktop traffic. So this also probably gets at the audience who we're talking about, people who perhaps own a PC versus an Apple computer. Perhaps they have Bing installed as their search network, and they're using their computer primarily during the day when they're working. So if you're looking for more desktop traffic, Bing is definitely a great place to find that.
Definitely. And desktop traffic, that's a hard thing to find these days. When I was at Google, this is probably 2018. They called it the Mo moment. It was like the mobile moment, where over 50% of the searches conducted on Google at that time was from a mobile device. So everything shifted. This was probably now 7, 8 years ago, from people who went online to do searches from desktop to mobile, and that shifted. Now, I mean, anyone who's listening to this and who's has some level of experience in advertising, we all know desktop traffic just converts better. It's easier to understand, it's easier to read, it's easier to optimize. They're also probably in a mindset less distracted, whereas if they're on the mobile device, they might be commuting to work, or they're just maybe in a meeting just trying to distract themselves on their phone. But if a user is on a desktop device, they are really honed in on finishing out a task. And we see it across pretty much all clients that desktop traffic just converts at a way higher rate. But it's hard to reach that desktop traffic just because so many searches are now conducted on mobile phones. Now with Microsoft, you have that opportunity where it does lean very heavily towards desktop. There's a bunch of reasons for this. So one, Google can be installed on a bunch of different smartphones. Everyone has probably the Google apps. Bing is not installed on most smartphones, so it's more of a desktop specific engine. Also, a lot of work computers historically and even currently are non-Mac devices. Non-Mac devices are generally have Bing as a preloaded search engine, so you get all that desktop traffic that's insanely valuable, converts really strongly. So very interesting. So when you look at even your Google data, break down performance in terms of conversion rates by device and see where you're getting those conversions. I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of them skew higher towards desktop. But with Microsoft and their network of engines, you can definitely get into some of that. And I'll
And I
just
think the
pose
other
a.
really
Oh,
interesting,
go ahead.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, you
No, I
go.
was going to say the other interesting point about Bing is that it does allow you to target specific audiences based on device types and operating systems. So you can even set certain bids for desktop, or if you really want to go after some operating system, Android, Apple, on Bing, you can also set those bids. So it does have that flexibility, which is something you don't see on Google.
Yep, absolutely. Really good point. Yeah, you're inherently going to skew a little bit more towards desktop, but you have a lot of functionality of targeting specific devices, operating systems, and things like that. Um, and yeah, for anyone who's on the live stream, feel free to drop in your comments of maybe your experiences with Microsoft, or even if you've advertised on Microsoft. Love to hear that. But let's continue. So this is one of the main differentiators. I mean, there's a ton that we talked about: lower CPCs on Microsoft, unique reach, desktop traffic, but LinkedIn data. So most advertisers and marketers forget that Microsoft owns Bing, Microsoft also owns LinkedIn, and they've been doing some really cool stuff over the past couple of years by integrating some of that data into search campaigns. So Jess, why don't you share with us a little bit of how that works?
Yeah, sure. So because of this shared partnership that they have, you can pull in some targeting from LinkedIn, like industry, job titles, companies, and add those as audience segments into your campaigns. This is, again, a really great thing for B2B clients who want to go after specific industries, specific companies, specific job titles, and allows you to kind of hone in on that audience. So we've seen some really good success with some of our B2B clients who are looking to target specific audiences and just kind of be able to track and also optimize towards that audience.
Yeah, it's and for example, some of the attributes that you can target based off of industry, based off of job function. You can even get as granular as targeting specific companies. And then so if you're a B2B marketer and let's say you have a niche product and maybe it's enterprise focused, you can target not only by search query, which everyone knows based off of keywords, but then on the back end, you can also add on some industry or employer type information on it. And while your reach is going to be pretty small because you need two things to happen: one, the search keyword, and then as well as the LinkedIn profile data, but that audience is going to be insanely relevant for you. So one thing that you could even consider is, as you're crafting these campaigns, maybe do one campaign that's hyper focused. They're like, okay, if anyone's in this company or in this job title doing these searches, I definitely want to be in that consideration all day. Have that in a separate campaign and just open up the bids and the budgets appropriately, just to test this out, just to make sure you're always there. So there's a lot of really interesting things. Now, the targeting capabilities in Microsoft ads or Bing ads isn't as robust as LinkedIn ads, but they do have a lot of attributes that you can layer onto your search campaigns, which is super helpful. So really, a takeaway from this slide: anyone who does B2B marketing, you should absolutely consider Microsoft ads and research that LinkedIn data integration. And for anyone who's listening either today or down the road, feel free to contact us. We can even do a screen share of how it works and how you can target your specific targeted industry for your search campaigns. So let's go on to the next one. So covered a lot of differentiators so far. Let's talk about the breadth of data, because this, I know we've been talking up Microsoft quite a bit, and for the right reasons. But this is something that Google probably leans a little bit heavier on in terms of the amount of data Google has at its disposal. So, Jess, I mean, what have you seen in your research on how much data that Google has that may have a leg up on Microsoft when it comes to this?
Yeah, it definitely does, especially when you're talking about machine learning and needing just lots of different signals. So you're talking about access to all of their products. So Google Search, you've got Chrome, Gmail, Google Drive, Google Maps, YouTube, all of this kind of information that's pouring into it, and just sheer volume of searches and information that it's being given constantly. And like we talked about earlier, Google has like 90% of the search market share, and Bing has 3%. So that's a dramatic difference when you're talking about machine learning and learning from data.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just Google is just such a behemoth. So I believe last time I checked, they have 9 different properties. So you think they're not just a search engine, they search, email, YouTube. And of their 9 properties, each of those has a billion users apiece. And I think search is like 3 billion or so. So that is a ton of data, which goes into our next slide of AI. So how do they compete on AI? Now, I'm not going to break down ChatGPT versus Google Bard. It seems that from that perspective, Microsoft came out ahead because they were, I guess, just had a more of a baked product that came out a little bit earlier. But as it comes to AI in terms of optimizing ad campaigns, I would probably give credit to Google for that, not because AI or Microsoft doesn't have that AI built out. It's just because Google has the scale play. And for anyone who's listening, AI, as I'm sure you've learned over the last year or so, AI is really just a function of, or the output of AI is only as good as the inputs. And with Google, you just have so many inputs. Again, I mentioned 9 properties, over a billion users apiece. And you also have that scale play. So when you're talking about optimizing search campaigns and maybe do some AI-based bidding to conversions or target CPA or things like that, Google just has so much more information on its user base, as well as you have so much more volume going through your campaigns that it can better optimize and be much more intelligent on driving conversions versus clicks. Microsoft also has that technology, but I believe that it's probably falls a little bit short, not from a technology standpoint, but only because the amount of scale going through those campaigns isn't as much as Google. So in that point, I'd probably give it to Google, but every campaign and every advertiser is different, and it comes down to scale. If you're doing a lot more on Microsoft, the machine's going to learn better, and it's going to be way more accurate in driving some of those business outcomes that you're looking for. So yeah, as we're wrapping up this live stream, we did want to just take a moment to talk about how do you get started with Bing ads. It may even seem a little daunting, of like, oh my gosh, I'm managing Google, I'm managing Meta. How on earth am I going to manage a whole nother platform? So let's sit on this for a little bit, Jess. What's the best way to get started with Bing ads?
Yeah, sure. So Bing was really smart in this sense where it has an auto import feature. So basically you can take all the campaigns that you have in Google, your setup, your structure, and import that directly into Bing. So everything will kind of be there. Even when you're doing an import, you can say, I want to reduce the budget by 70%. So it does all of that for you. The one key point about that is to make sure you shut off auto import to avoid any kind of future headaches, because otherwise what will happen is Bing will continue to update everything as it moves along, which would include your budget. So you don't want to overspend. Or the other really important thing is you don't want to continue to optimize towards Google data. You want to optimize towards the Bing data. But yeah, really, really easy. The auto import feature we've used across multiple clients, and most of our clients are coming from Google into Bing. So it's a really easy setup process.
Yeah, so easy. Yeah, and Microsoft is very smart. They know that marketers are super busy, and it may seem, yeah, as I mentioned, a little daunting starting a whole new platform, but their import feature is fast. You click with literally 2 or 3 clicks of a button, you sign into Google, you select which account and campaigns that you want to import, and then it's going to be in within 30 minutes or less. But yes, definitely disable the auto import, because if you have big budgets on Google, if you don't disable it, those budgets are going to be passed over to Microsoft. You might be surprised the next morning when you log into your account and a lot of money was spent. But you'll probably also get a lot of customers too, so that's always fun. But yeah, and then lastly, just to emphasize again, is set up proper conversion tracking with every platform that you're on, whether it be Google or Meta. LinkedIn, in this case, Microsoft and Bing ads, make sure that appropriate conversion tracking is set up. So at the end of the day, end of the month, you can see how much that you invested and how many customers or leads that you're getting. And then compare that data with Google. How does that compare with it? And for a lot of our clients, not every one of them, but a lot of them, the cost per lead is lower. And even on for e-commerce, a lot of e-commerce advertisers are actually seeing a better return on investment on Bing over Google, which was not expecting that when we launched some of these e-commerce campaigns on Bing, but now we're definitely pushing that quite a bit. So as we wrap up here, first, Jess, thank you so much for dropping all this awesome knowledge on Microsoft ads. I would ask anyone who's listening, if you do want to get started with Microsoft ads, contact us. Our website's right there, risemkg.com. Also, for anyone who's listening, definitely subscribe to our channel. We are doing these free webinars pretty much about every other week. Prior is just monthly, but we're getting a lot of great feedback from it. And so please subscribe, and then so that way you're in the know for future. But with that, we'll end on this note. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out, but appreciate it.